So again, for those of you that are listening live, I got Robert Mann in here with me today, and we're going to talk a little bit about his journey, about how he ended up where he's at, and then we're going to talk about text and email recruiting, how we can improve those processes, get more leads, clients, and candidates. Just looking for more modern approaches. But Robert, I mean, why don't you tell us about where you're at now, how you got there, and all that stuff, man?
Yeah, so I started as a high school teacher for 8 years, so I always say like I did my volunteering, so I kind of went on to my my unpaid volunteering. I did get paid, but whatever. But at about 30, if 20s are for learning, I'm doing the 30s are for learning because I spent my 20s teaching high school, which was a learning experience, but not in the business world. I did about 5 years of recruiting, so I went to healthcare locum staffing, which is position temporary. My last stop on that journey was a firm where I had to do marketing. So I had to dig deep and start learning, what were we using? We weren't using Marketo. We were using one of the Marketo-like products or Pardot-like products, but it was I can't remember the name right now. And we were using HubSpot. And so I had to learn email marketing. I did a lot of the HubSpot marketing classes. I started really geeking out on inbound. And then from there, I went to Bullhorn. And I think I'm more of a startup person. Like I love wearing multiple hats, being really gritty, not being siloed into like you're just doing sales. Like I don't think I thrive there. So ended up from Bullhorn transitioning to one of their marketplace partners, Herefish, which is interesting because it's like a HubSpot, Marketo, Pardot tool, but built for the ATS. So you can automate off of placements, automate off of submissions, candidate records, contact record, company, and so it was like a natural fit because I was super curious about HubSpot and the marketing tools, and just got to talk about something that I really enjoyed, which was email marketing, texting through automation, and really just using automation to improve the experience. So one of the things that we kind of find is that staffing is a little bit behind technology-wise, right? Like right now in the sales world, if you're in the Salesforce ecosystem, everything's about sales enablement or conversational intelligence, which I keep track of because you're going to see that come downwind into staffing soon, if it's not already here, or in the making. But I started to educate people about automation and automation marketing for staffing. So I created a channel that I would just post on LinkedIn to start, kind of like you, Donnie, right? Where it's called Automation Weekly, and I would tell you about. And let me know if there's an echo, by the way. Is the echo, does it sound bad? I'm kind of hearing it.
You're good.
Okay. So I started teaching people about how automation works for staffing, how this marketing automation works for staffing. And I did it consistently. I called it Automation Monday to start, and it became Automation Weekly because trying to do it every Monday was just really difficult. Right. And I would interview people, or I would talk about new ways to leverage automation in their process. If you guys aren't aware, like really the two big players for candidate engagement automation are Sense and Herefish. Herefish was just acquired by Bullhorn. And so 2018 I worked at Bullhorn, 2019 I worked at Herefish. End of 2019, Herefish gets acquired by Bullhorn. I'm not going to go back to the job that I was already doing that I didn't like working for. Like, by the way, Bullhorn is a tremendous company. Their leadership is stellar. They're really good people. But if you're not an enterprise or like a mid-sized company person, like me, like I feel like I like the startup better. It just keeps me hungry. I wasn't going to go back, so I don't want to say anything bad about Bullhorn. It's more about me. And so I was making all this content, and so January 2020, I was just anyone who found out that I was on the market was super interested in me because I was creating content all of last year. They were like really fired up about the fact that I was putting myself out there, that I was educating. I wasn't, Gary Vee, if you guys are familiar with Gary Vee, talks about that, the jab, right hook or whatever it is, like give, take or ask. Yep. And I was just giving, like, I didn't create the videos and be like, hey, this is a lead funnel for me. I was really doing it to genuinely give. But the fact that it gave back to me when I was looking for a job, right? Like people were coming out of the woodwork. Every time I heard someone, they were like, hey, you need to talk to Rob, or hey, can we talk? Right. And I don't think that's my skill as a salesperson necessarily. We did well at Herefish, but a lot of that was inbound, so we'll talk about that. And partner sales, which is a whole thing that I think staffing really needs to kind of focus on and try and figure out in the way that technology players do. But But yeah, and then I ended up at EmployeeStream, who I've been friends with those guys since 2018 from the Bullhorn Marketplace, doing onboarding automation, mobile-friendly onboarding, and just generally trying to improve the candidate experience for healthcare, light industrial staffing firms. So that's it. I talked for a long time.
Got it. No, that's great. So you're at EmployeeStream now, and you guys specialize a little bit more with staffing firms then.
Yeah, so not recruiting, headhunting, truly staffing. So getting people to work, and think about all the systems that we've had in the past. Mm-hmm. I've really been trying to, like, when a recruiting or staffing firm buys software, they're trying to make their life easier.
Right.
And so what EmployeeStream really tries to do is create a one portal for the candidates to go into, and then it makes their life easier. It's a mobile-friendly experience. If you think about staffing firms, if you're going on site, like to a retail staffing firm and going to a branch location, there might be like 20 people in there. There's 10 to 20 people. There's 2 computers to fill out paperwork. With EmployeeStream, you could send all that stuff to their phone they're on anyway, and they can complete it. So maybe they're, instead of being there for 3 hours waiting half the time, they're interviewing, and then they're on their phone doing paperwork, and then they're out the door and making that experience. Like, that sounds like a much nicer experience, right? Like, do you like waiting in the DMV line? Because I don't. So.
Right. So that helps that helps your brands then to create a better experience for both their clients and their candidates then.
Exactly. And then the internal staff, it actually makes it easier because it'll automatically send out the E-Verify after Section 2 is complete, which is a nerdy thing, so we don't need to talk about that. It'll send the background check providers out automatically. So if this authorization form is signed, send this out. So your internal staff gets benefits, and they can focus on creating a great experience for those people that are coming through the door.
Awesome. So let's kind of transition a little bit to this topic here. Let's talk about email, text marketing, and things like that. And what have you experienced just from, if we were just to kind of hone in on one area, more on the candidate development side. I mean, what's out there? What's winning? What have you seen in the past?
So number one, we have to talk about referrals. So and I know you talked about the top of the funnel, like helping getting people into the funnel.
Yep.
But let's talk about how you use the people you're already engaged with to fill that funnel. So let's go, like, if right here was hire, here's post hire, let's use that to push people back through, right?
Yep.
And so think about the 2 places that piss off candidates more than anything else in the world. They apply for a job on your website and they don't get anything back, or they agree to be submitted, you submit them as the recruiter, and they don't hear anything back. This is still, this has been the number 1 complaint for maybe decades, and it's still the number 1 complaint. And so both Send and Herefish, right? I'll be fair. I'm not going to, tout. Make it so that you can, so come into the system, they get into the ATS. There's they come off the website. You can auto respond to that candidate saying, hey, thank you so much for applying. Sometimes you can send pre-qualification surveys in the email. Sometimes you don't, but depending on the vertical. But hey, thank you so much for applying. Click here to book time on my calendar, right? And maybe if you ask some pre-qualification questions, you say, hey, don't think, you may not be the best fit for this role, but let's connect. Here's my calendar link, right? So you can immediately get feedback. And you can do that through some website technology. But the thing about using these automation tools is it creates a journey. So it's multiple steps. So if, Donnie, you apply to my staffing firm, I send you the first email, or maybe it comes out via text. Maybe you're a light industrial person. So I text you and say, hey, click here to book some time, right? And it pops open the web browser on your phone, on your mobile device. And now you're booking time directly on my calendar to chat. So I don't have to worry about you trying to call me when I'm not available, which we'll get into later. The meeting's already booked, and you think that my firm is responsive because it comes from my email address, and you're getting something. And then if you don't respond for the first email or text, it goes through a path for 5 to 7 days, and you don't fall through the cracks. So not having to rely on humans to remember, which is what we should be doing. We should be having conversations and building rapport. And, at the end of the day, it's just, so step 1, you've won that step. Okay, number 1 complaint. Now, number 2, you have a candidate and you submit them, and we can talk about all kinds of tools to make submissions better, but you submit them, and so I'm going to wrap a bunch of things together here. I started a podcast called the You and the Experience Podcast. Episode 1 launched April 15th. It's more about employee stream. Episode 2 is going to be about something called Great Recruiters. But the founder of Great Recruiters said something to me. His name is Adam Conrad. He said, every Friday, I made sure my recruiters called every candidate that we submitted and said, hey, I have no feedback for you. Because, again, that's where the biggest complaints occur. Like, that's where you need to make sure that the experience, the journey, right, the outcome is the job, or, like, fail quickly or lose quickly, right? Like find out it's not a good fit immediately, and then bring them back into the funnel. Like, start talking to them again. So if you can either remember to call them, set a fanatical Friday, that's what he calls it, really pumped about that, or use automation to say, hey, every X amount of days, if this status doesn't change on the submission, send them an email from me just being like, hey, I have no feedback, or a text. They're just happy to hear, I think,
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And you're improving that. And so that's a really long-winded way of saying, once those people are placed, or, a lot of people tell me that their number one referral source are people that they never placed. So if you can create an incredible experience that creates transparency and a great relationship with people, and then you say, hey, I know I wasn't able to help you, or hey, you love this job, do you know anyone? Do you know anyone that can help? So instead of, obviously focusing on the top of the funnel is important, and having a great inbound strategy to do that, to help convert is really important, and you should have that. But if you can create an incredible experience for these people, that's going to help them flip and become your number one placement source.
Right.
Your life will get a lot easier, I think. So that's why I always talk about post-hire first.
Yep. Yep. No, and I totally agree. I think that's one of the things, speaking with a lot of people in the market, and going into the pain you're talking about of candidates and not getting the follow back and the feedback that they want. And then what that does is that in turn creates a bad reputation for every recruiter out there. And so, using technology like this is a huge differentiator for you. One, from how you can market it, but two, that you're actually building and developing a better process that doesn't rely 100% on human effort. And that is just the key that people need to wrap their head around, that when you use certain parts of automation, and one of the things that you brought up earlier and that I think is key is that a lot of people have this misconception that automation is going to dehumanize things. And when you leverage automation the proper way, it actually creates more opportunity for better human interaction. So you're using your automation tools to make for better, easier conversations and more human connection. And I think that's one of the things I would open people to changing the way you think about it. If you do automation right, it's actually going to create more human connection, not less, right? And it allows you to follow up. And that's huge, man.
So it's kind of funny. So in my office, I had a blank wall behind my camera. So I would be shooting the automation videos. And so I stole the Herefish banner from a conference, and underneath it, one of our mottos is make automation personal. So it has to be personal, but I 100% agree with you that anytime, I'm a huge advocate of making sure that the automation is human. So if you're just leaving your normal drip campaigns on now, guys, for top of the funnel people you don't know or people with this whole COVID thing going on, you're not doing step number one of automation, and that's being human and paying attention to your automation. You need to pay attention to it. You would, and this kind of ties into the top of the funnel story, right? Creating more opportunity to have conversations. So I agree with you 100%. I think that, automation is not going to take jobs away. It's going to create opportunities for human interaction. And whether that human interaction is you recruiting or you being more of a service provider, either way, that your goal is to make that person a fan of you and treat that person like a human, so that they're going to refer you. They're going to want to do business with you. They know you're going to do right by them. You're going to be transparent. So I couldn't agree more. And as we get into the top of the funnel story, you'll hear why automation creates more room for human interaction. So.
Yeah. So tell us about that. Tell us about the top of the funnel.
Yeah. So this is a great story. I use this story to sell Herefish every day. Every time I demoed, I probably did 250 demos last year. So this story came up sometimes 6 times a day. But there's a firm in Ireland. He doesn't care if I say his name, but I'm not going to. And he built out this crazy tech stack, right? It's not just one technology. There's a lot of technologies. But we focus on the forward-facing or the candidate-facing ones. And so he created this tech stack where he could basically, the end goal was that he went from having to do outbound recruiting and throwing headcount at trying to grow to, and this is what outreach, if you guys are familiar with outreach, a sales enablement tool, they're like, hey, make your 10-person sales team operate like a 100-person. And he did that through Herefish. So again, Herefish and Sense are both opportunities for you to do this. In this case, this guy was using Herefish. So what he did was anytime they thought a candidate was a good fit or they wanted to get in contact with someone or someone applied, they entered them into a short list or a list, and they started by texting them in a cadence, right? So instead of cold calling first, a new lead or someone that they thought was a good fit, they would enter them into a list, they would get a text message. Hey, we have this great role, and they would actually tell the company's name. So they'd be like, hey, we have this great role at Microsoft. And then if they didn't respond, they would go through a series for 5 to 7 days, like we said, of getting emails and text messages alternating. And so 50% don't respond, like this is exactly from this guy's mouth. Like 50% didn't respond. If people responded and they were like, hey, I'm not a senior Java developer, I'm a senior .NET developer. I could probably say that, but like, you know what I mean? Like, and then so number one in the game of sales or recruiting, you always need to get one thing from a call, right, to make it worthwhile. So anytime they give you information, now you're putting it back into the ATS, and now you're going to use that later on for the next search, right? And so, okay, so he's going through. So half don't respond, maybe 30, 25% are not a right fit. Maybe they don't want to work for Microsoft, but they're really jazzed to work for Google, or they want to work for Apple. And so they're entering all that information in, but the percentage of people who do want to talk, they would get a Calendly link, and that Calendly link would just let that candidate book directly on that person's schedule.
Yep.
And so now, and this is if you're familiar with HubSpot inbound methodology, right?
Yep.
That's the inbound methodology. So you send someone a calendar link, hey, book when you're ready. My calendar's up to date. Just let me know what works for you. And so really, his recruiters, he's probably under 20 recruiters. They have 7 to 10 warm calls booked every day, just by nurturing the groups that they want to, adding that calendar link. So even if you were using a newsletter, or like let's kind of like step back from the targeting and the lead conversion. Let's say you're using a newsletter or you're creating content and you're embedding Calendly links in there, right? It's the same idea, is where you can, basically say like, hey, if you're interested in learning more, right? So like, let me take a step back here. So in Herefish, we would always show a re-engagement campaign. So typically a firm would only engage with about 10% of their database.
Right.
Take exactly what that is. So if you have 100,000 people, you're interacting with 10,000 to make numbers simple. If you can start to nurture everyone via email through like a newsletter and trickle some jobs in that are relevant, right? And then from there, have the calendar link, like, hey, if you want to chat, my calendar link's here. So now you're letting them come to you when they're ready, and you know you're ready because your calendar's up to date. And so through those two tools, through that direct outbound reaching, but through text and email, and not having the human pick up the phone. And then the other thing is you don't have to worry about the human picking up the phone to call you back and you being on the phone, cold calling, right, or whatever. Like, you both know you're going to be able to connect. It creates a great experience for the candidate. Your recruiters are much happier. And then you have the nurturing campaign. And then there is some website tracking. So, like, they put a tracking code on your website so you can see what behavioral activity that people are doing. And so, if someone clicked through, but they didn't take any action to like come inbound to you, you could actually reach out and call them.
Right.
And be like, hey, I find it very creepy when you call them and be like, hey, I saw you looked at this, but I don't know if that's always the best. But you call them and say, hey, I know I've been emailing you. Are you interested, or what's kind of interest to you? And kind of, I like to play dumb because I feel like it's a little bit creepy, but people also take the method of like, hey, I saw you downloaded this post. Are you interested? Right, the true HubSpot inbound gated content methodology there. So
yeah, No, and I think that's key because, when you're getting people inbound, one, you're getting a much more qualified prospect on the phone that actually wants to be there. Two, you're just way more leveraged, with your time. And I think that there's, however you're trying to build that strategy, through content, through lead magnets and things like that. But you always want to be putting some sort of a calendar out there. And one of the other places that's easy to do is just right on your LinkedIn profile, have that link ready to book and share everywhere, essentially website, that's how it is for me. That's the only way that people can get in touch with me is through my calendar. And that also creates safety and space around, my workday, because I know one of the biggest challenges in the industry is how am I going to, get all the work that I need to get done? And what happens easily because of the day and because other people's schedules, we get on this whole chasing pattern of having to do these different activities. And when, we have, okay, this is when I'm going to do these calls, and a little bit more organization and structure and people booking on them, it's just a much more efficient way to run the business.
Yeah, I 100% agree. A couple things come up, right? It's like, so I got to go through John Barrow's sales training. If you're a recruiter and you don't know who John Barrows is, I would check him out. He's really a great sales trainer. And you're trying to sell time. The first thing you're always selling with people is time, right? So if they're coming inbound, they're giving you their time already, right? But if you're outbound prospecting, you have to get them on the phone and then wow them enough to get time back from them, right? So it reminds me of that. But I do agree. So it's really funny. My life for the last 3 years selling software has been basically a calendar of meetings booked, right? And so if I have fires I need to put out, or if I have follow-up I need to do, you look at your calendar on Sunday, and you see all your calls that are booked, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, when am I going to do these things that I already know I have to do? I try to do them on Sunday because that's Sunday at 6 o'clock is the best time to be productive. But I can schedule it because if you think about a recruiter's life, right? When I was a recruiter, my day would get blown up all the time. Whether I had to submit somebody or I had a good conversation from an outbound call, and then I had to go write an email and thinking about too much about an email. If you get a long email from me, I'm very unhappy that I had to write it, number one. But number two, I'm mad that I'm going to make you read this. It has to be long. I write, so number one, I don't write long emails anymore. I write short emails. I get to the point. If you need to understand deeper what I'm saying to you, you can call me. And I'll even say, hey, I don't write long emails. Call me if you want to talk about this. Let's schedule some time to talk, because it's going to get everything done in a much more efficient manner. You're not going to have to read through a diatribe of me explaining product to you and sending you to a white paper or sending you to a website. No, just get on the phone with me. But yeah, your day gets blown up, and that whole plan to cold call goes out the window, and now you're trying to play catch up, and your boss is you got to make $100, and you're what are $100 going to do for me? What qualified lead is going to come from $100? Right. And so I did. We had a really good marketing engine going last year. The CMO, one of the co-founders of Herefish, is an inbound legend, man. This guy doesn't get enough credit. But through inbound organic traffic and partnerships, we grew very rapidly to the point where Bullhorn decided they had to acquire us, right, to compete. And it was through inbound. So it was a lot of retargeting, but just a lot of great content and a lot of great word of mouth, which goes back to that post-hire side of, right, the fence, or, once someone's working with you, once someone's submitted. So I don't think I could emphasize that part more. Right. But again, your day gets blown up, so stop cold calling people. Let them book on your schedule. I love that. I've never thought about doing it, but I guess I could put my calendar link. Can you embed it in a pretty way? Hey, so can you embed it under text, book here if you want to chat, or is it just the whole link?
I just put my whole link, but my link is personalized. I have my calendar embedded on my website, so it doesn't look like it's Calendly or anything like that. It's just my.
Yeah, so I have the HubSpot link for employee stream. So
yeah,
I embedded it in an email. It's in all my emails.
Yeah, and all my emails it's embedded, but on LinkedIn and stuff, it's just out there, But it's
got it.
What would you say? I mean, what's your advice for, I mean, being able to email people and text people is one thing. So how do we solve the problem of getting their data? I mean, what's your best advice on that?
Getting their
information. So, I mean, if you're not going to use like a lead magnet or an opt-in, how are you getting it? Are you using scraping tools? Does that come with some of the software that you recommend, or?
Yeah, so there's some really great AI and matching tools. So, I always think of Daxtra. So if you've heard of them, and these things are not cheap, guys. So like if you're a small shop, like you got to think about your strategic your tools. But Daxtra is a great one. SourceBreaker, any tool that's going to go out and grab and pull it into the ATS. And I think if we're going to talk about automation, Donnie, we got to talk about good data.
Oh, yeah.
And you being dedicated to making sure that your data is entering your system. So whatever system of record you have, it's going in correctly. Like you're not all capsing names. You're not. If you have a small shop and you have other recruiters, like they can't be lazy. Your data is worth more than oil. Everything's worth more than oil right now, right? It's negative, but data is generally more expensive than oil now. And so you need to be highly focused and invested in that coming into your system correctly so that any kind of automation can work. And that's what those tools do. So like the Daxtra, the SourceBreaker can help pull data in. Daxtra has a tool that like basically sets rules on how the data enters into the ATS. So like it won't let all caps come through. It'll make sure that there's an address. Like it's called like Daxtra Capture. I haven't actually used it, but a lot of my really successful customers use it to make sure that their data quality and when they're going to, their data quality is good for when they're going to do the outbound automation. So, and then, if you don't want to pay for lists, you scrape them off of job sites or you scrape them off the internet. And then some of the tools can actually reverse market jobs. So, like I have this candidate, let's find jobs that match that are being broadcasted off of HR pages or HR, the HR page for a company.
What's been your experience like when you go scrape somebody's data and then you put them through kind of that cold outreach via email and text? I mean, more on the text side. Cold email's pretty standard, but what about on the text side?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of cold texting people unless they're already in the system and have opted into it. But I mean, if you're up front and you're not wasting their time, like, you're going to get a great open rate. You're going to get a 90+ open rate.
Right.
And
everybody opens their text.
Yeah. So you might as well.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll take that back. Maybe you should. But yeah, so, the question is like, what experience have we had? I think that company cold text people. I think they scrape in and then they cold text people because they're on a job board. So,
right.
They're essentially looking, maybe if they've left the job, maybe if they've, took a job about 6 months ago and they're not super interested or they're on a bad day, you might get a bad text back, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I know that that company that we were referencing is successful with it. So, I'm in. I think that's a great channel. Highly recommend using text. Because again, that open rate is so high. And I think that, number one, and this is really funny. So like I highly recommend to people, especially IT people, anyone that a recruiter. And I know we used it. I used it when I joined a locums firm, and we always talk to doctors and be like, well, and like we were doing ER staffing. So I don't know if you guys know this, but most ERs are not owned. Like most ER staff are not owned by that hospital, right? Like they're outsourced to some large companies, and these large companies would win the contract and just lay off everybody that was at the hospital. And so like literally like one of our talk tracks would be like, well, I know you may not be in the market now, but like you work at a hospital that's run by this group. What would happen if this group lost the contract? Would they retain you, or would you be out of a job? And so any profession, you should probably know a recruiter. If someone calls you, filter them out, right? There's going to be guys who are very transactional, but like find a recruiter that you like and just be willing to talk to them. So if you were to text me as a recruiter, number one, I'm going to give you the time. I'm going to be like, hey, not in the market right now, but thank you for reaching out. If you can get to me and be interesting and be relevant, I probably will have a conversation with you. Just because I want to know good people and I want to talk to you. So the thing about adding value or being personal and a little bit of timing, with making sure that I'm not 10 demos deep that day and you're texting me cold and I'm like, holy crap, dude, like I'm going to be nice to you. I'm like, hey, no thanks for reaching out, but I'm probably not going to give you time of day. So it's a little bit of timing, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to understand that, and unfortunately, look, we're at 26 million unemployed right now.
Yeah.
Staffing firms are going to reach that nice whirlwind once we can get back to work, because people are going to get back and be deployed. And we have a presidential election coming up. You can say whatever you want. I think we're going to get locked down again towards the winter. So no one's going to be hiring perm, unfortunately. Or people are not going to be hiring perm as much. So sorry if you're a recruiting firm, but just be mindful. And then so staffing's going to do well. But if 26 million people, everyone's on LinkedIn right now, and everyone's saying, hey, how can we help you? And it's like, truly staffing people are good people and recruiting people are good people. So they're literally trying to help you. They may make some money on it, they may not. But if you had a recruiter that was your advocate before you unfortunately had this happen, like, you're calling that person and you're like, hey, you already know what happened. You know why I'm calling you. But what do you have? What do you see? Like, they're going to give you some peace of mind. They're going to tell you about what they're seeing, and that's what their job is all day, right? Like, your job is to be a IT developer or an accountant. Their job is to literally know the market. So, like, you got to have that. Like, you have a financial advisor, you should have a career advisor, and a recruiter, a good one, can be that.
Yep.
So, kudos to all the recruiters out there.
To get started on the texting, emailing thing, like, what's your next step? What do you recommend?
You gotta be realistic about your data. So step one, be realistic about your data. Make sure that's in place. Step two, so we always talk about what this, and I know this, but it's all a big test. So what's your goal? What's the scientific method around this, right? So, like, set the goal, what you're trying to figure out, set how you're going to test it. Obviously, you need tools. You want to know what success looks like for you, so pick a number. Doesn't mean anything. It's just a number. Just have it. And then wrap the tools around it and have fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't get perfection paralysis. That is the worst thing. Make video. Include some video, because I think people need to see your face. That was one of the reasons why I started creating video too at Hairfish. I was so unsuccessful. I was successful towards the end of Bullhorn, but I wasn't having a lot of success. And I was like, these guys don't know me from the door, right? I need my face out there. So I started putting it on LinkedIn to do that. You do it on Facebook and LinkedIn, and get your face out there. Let people know who you are, and then from there, test it. Like, set the automation up. I will say this, that automation is very literal. And so when you create automations, right, you create a list for your audience, and then you create the steps, and then each step has content, right? So whether it's a text, like, what's the text going to say? And that part, sometimes you want to focus on that because you want the right message, you want the right, you want your brand and personality to shine through. Right. So that's time consuming. The steps and the list are pretty quick. But when you build a list, when you build the audience, always remember that automation is going to be very literal. So if you want to list, so let's think about this automation. If you want to send a, how was your first day text message, and you've been in operation for 10 years, and you turned on that automation today, you have to remember that if you don't exclude people that have been outside of a month of working, everyone's going to get that message, whether they've worked with you for 10 years as a contractor or a day. So you have to think that this is a machine. It's going to be very literal. And it's not to scare you, because you shouldn't be scared of this, but it's a logic game, right?
Yep.
And so you have to play this should in no way scare you. Hopefully it doesn't, but people get weird. But you have to be very literal about how you use automation. So I'm happy to help you. Think literally, hey, who's going to get this message? If you send it to this group, people who have a placement at any date, that is not what you want to send it to if you want a first day text. You want to send it to everyone who has a placement date after today, right, that has a placement, like, and move from there, right? So, so goal, right? Have a goal. Know what you're testing to. Don't have perfection paralysis, and think of it as like you practice law, you practice medicine. You're pretty much practicing as a teacher.
Yep.
You're always practicing as a sales and marketing person, right? So that's why those two can tie together so well. Because it's a talk track on the phone or a demo, or it's a talk track in an email or a text message. Like what's going to convert, and always be testing. Thanks. Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I always say that good marketers are really just good testers, and anybody that says anything different is really a liar, because that's how you get there. And with automation, the cool thing about it is, I mean, like you're explaining, you can't just like turn your back on it, and you have to take some time to set it up. You have to take time to understand your market, your message. And then once you press play, like that's the start, it's not the end. Now the testing begins. And if you're willing to buy into that, the results can be exponential, right? But so many people have this easy in mind, and it's kind of like, well, where's the plug and play? And the plug and play doesn't exist anywhere. So, setup and all that stuff, man, I totally agree. It's just, it's imperative for your success to be willing to test and optimize.
Yeah, and I think that goes for you just picking, even if you are going to stay outbound, right? It still goes for you.
All of it, everything.
You're still testing all the time. So
awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being here and dropping all this value. How can everybody get in touch with you, man?
I'm on LinkedIn. I pretty much live on there, like the modern salesperson. So Robert Mann. And if you want to email me, it's just robert.mann. I have 2 N's in my last name, so MANN @EmployStream. Literally spell employ, EMPLOYSTREAM.com. But I'm on LinkedIn a lot, so if you message me there, I'm definitely on board to connect with you guys, and happy to share. One of the guys that I'm friends with is he got. I love this guy. I love this story. So I have to share with you real quick. He's working at a digital marketing firm for staffing, or digital marketing firm for staffing firms, right, recruiting firms. He got let go at the beginning of this. Immediately transitioned. He was like, "What is the biggest problem when someone tries to engage me at this marketing firm? Like, why was I not? If I was losing a deal, why was I losing it?" And it was because people didn't have good websites. And so, like, he's a digital marketing guy, and he immediately pivoted, and now has a company. Not everyone has the ability to make a company out of thin air, but he's got a podcast that he's starting. I was on the phone with him yesterday talking about what I learned starting my podcast and launching it. And then he's launching a website building site for, small and medium recruiting and staffing companies. So, and if you don't have a good website and you're drawing people to your content, it's going to be a rough go. So make sure that website is tight. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to look good, and try to get rid of the powered by on the bottom if you can.
Yeah. Get that personal brand going rather than powered by somebody else.
Sorry, I had to drop the story and make this thing longer.
Yeah. No worries, man. No worries. What's one last piece of advice you can leave everybody?
Make content. Stop being scared. Just put your face out there. And it doesn't have to be great. And by the way, if you don't nail it on the first or second try, if you don't, if there's like one mistake on attempt number 2, if you don't just accept that, you're going to be on attempt like 30. It's going to be like a film where like there's 30 takes and the director's pissed at the actor. So it's okay having mistakes, create content, and just have fun with it. Try and test it. Like, I had to take all my videos off of LinkedIn and put them on YouTube and then post them to LinkedIn so I could actually track what was actually working and like where people fell off, because I couldn't get any of those metrics off of LinkedIn. So now I'm actually, I did it anyway. I created content anyway all last year, but now I'm actually starting to get that testing behind it. So
awesome, man. And for those of you listening, I swear I didn't hold them up to that. Just like everybody else that comes onto this podcast, there's a common theme of you got to create content. So if you're not there, definitely get into that game. If you are there, keep plugging forward. Robert, thank you so much for being here, man, dropping all that value and taking time out of your day. Relevant Recruiter Network, we'll see you guys soon. Thanks, man.
Happy to do it, Donnie. Thank you.